Welcome to the show, and welcome to Glow So Bright. So, I spent a week over at Paulden, Arizona, and went over to Gunsite Academy for their 223 Carbine Course. It is an entry-level course for intermediate carbines, where it primarily focuses on the AR-15, but any other intermediate caliber removable box magazine fed semi-automatic carbine can also work, such as AKs, Galils, bullpups such as Devore, and other similar firearms. And while the manual of arms and everything is mainly focused on the AR-15, I've seen some other stuff as well. Now, had the opportunity to go over there, checked it out, and learned a few things. And now while this video isn't the most organized, there are a few takeaways I can go and tell you about my own experience in their course. So what sort of equipment did I bring over at Gunsite to use? Well, the rifle I was using is a AR-15 pattern firearm, and the particular one I was using is this Gunsite Super Duty, as is configured. So I have up front, I have the Surefire dual cell scout light with a vampire head, so I can switch between a infrared light for night vision use, or a white light for low light use. And then over here I have a primary arms PLXC low powered variable optic, meters reticle, 1:8 zoom range, mounted on a primary arms PLX mount with a 1.5 inch height over rail, as well as on top of it a Holosun 509T pistol red dot reflex sight as a backup sighting system. This one is a very, very, very common pattern of the more modern types of AR-15s out there. You have your own way to passively use night vision. You have a magnified optic of some sort, most of the time a low powered variable optic or a prism sight, and an external white light, as well as flip up backup iron sights as a tertiary sighting system. And then I also have with a Vickers tactical 2-point sling. As far as my sidearm, I'm using a Shadow Systems MR920 9mm handgun. I've taken this handgun over at Gunsite's 350 pistol course, or intermediate pistol course, with their emphasis on the use of the red dot sight. So with this pistol, I've been using the Holosun primary arms 507C red dot sight, so armor pattern red dot, direct mount to the slide, as well as a Surefire X300 Turbo. Dependable handgun, I like mine, but quality control may vary on yours. And this sort of equipment, it works. Passed satisfactorily through Gunsite's course. However, for their own training, their own doctrine, and the engagement ranges to be expected to be using a rifle, this is a bit overkill for the weight penalty you get from it. But there are other ways where this rifle did shine. I can get to that later. So, I don't have one of these in the reference collection, but the ideal carbine for Gunsite's doctrine and their own training would be something different than this. This isn't the incorrect answer, but not the best answer for whatever problems Gunsite would throw at for their training. And ideally, the carbine to be used for Gunsite would be an AR-15 platform firearm with a pencil barrel, 16 inches long, a polymer drop-in handguard, such as a Magpul MOE handguard, with a fixed front sight-based gas block, with a lightweight flashlight mounted on top, such as a 1-cell scout light. Over at the rear of the rifle, instead of having a magnified optic, would have a backup iron sight or fixed iron sight, as well as a reflex sight mounted on top, such as an aim point, for example. And instead of this modern 2-point tactical sling, instead they would prefer to use something like a convertible 1.2-point sling, such as a Magpul MS3 or MS4, which is a lot lighter and a lot more handier than this sort of setup over here, especially at close range, unsupported shooting 100 yards or 50 yards and less even. As far as for handling of the firearm, the carbine, huge emphasis on safety, which is good, especially for introductory level shooters that this course is intended for, and to have the rifle be slung and have the muzzle be pointed down at all times. And Also, when the rifle is being racked and removed, muzzle is pointed downwards. That way, when a rifle or a carbine is stashed and retrieved, there is no way for the muzzle to go up and down and deal with all sorts of issues and problems. Other things is that the handling of the carbine through Gunsite doctrine hasn't really changed much. They haven't changed much since the most recent carbine handbook published in 2004. After the end of the assault weapons ban, more than 20 years old at this moment, as well as their legacy doctrine and handling from the 90s. Nothing too much has changed, except for maybe the preference for a collapsible buttstock instead of a fixed one, or a standardized height for the flat top of a receiver. So with handling the carbine, one thing it did emphasize was to reach down into the magazine pouch. They don't really care too much about where the magazines are oriented or where they're placed on the body, as long as it's consistent and you can get a full-handed grip on the magazine. But when the magazine is then inserted into the rifle, push upward, then give a slight tug downward. From there, rack the charging handle to the rear, let go of it like a slingshot, and then release the magazine and see if the cartridge, the position of the cartridge has shifted over to the other side. So if the cartridge initially started over at the left, the topmost cartridge was at the left, then after the rifle is loaded, the topmost cartridge is on the right for these double column, double stack magazines. And with that, visually and tactfully, can't speak English today, would be also working in no light or low light conditions. Very handy if you're wearing night vision. Not the fastest way to do reloads, but also a way to ensure that you don't drop magazines on the ground, especially when you think that it's fully seated. You shoot the rifle, the magazine just ejects. After the magazine is loaded, the weapon is charged. Then, with the non-firing hand, check to make sure the bolt is fully closed, then close the dust cover with the non-firing hand. They haven't gotten over any sort of press checks or anything like that. I think that might be more advanced technique or something not covered in Gunsite's doctrine, such as grabbing a charging handle, pulling to the rear, and then check to make sure that there's a either a casing or a gaping hole in the chamber, and close the dust cover, then close the forward assist. Like the Duke and Ashley technique, I don't think that's covered in Gunsite, but it's something I did not learn, but at the same time, it is an introductory carbine course. Another thing I did learn about over at Gunsite would be that they use the primary sighting system, so nothing else would be used. So don't use the iron sights except for using a front sight as an index point. Don't use a reflex sight mounted on top. The instructors don't like that because they think you're shooting over the sights even though you're actually getting a reticle.
Yeah. Use your sights. Your first two shots, you were looking over the top of the sight.
I was using the reflex.
Okay. Okay, cool.
And with that sort of stuff, a low-powered first focal plane optic over here is not the best choice. One thing is that with Arizona being very, very bright, very, very hot, the illumination on the reticle would need to be bumped up at full, and then even then it's still kind of hard, especially with a higher battery drain. So then I look down and the index points and everything like that, and the weird wonkiness of magnified optics in general gives it more of a challenge to me than a reflex sight such as a red dot sight or holographic. Not ideal, but still usable. Another thing I did learn is that while this isn't necessarily intended carbine used for Gunsite's doctrine, I want to use it because I want to get more familiar with it. It also works extremely well at longer ranges and at supported shooting positions, so at the pro position, using a magazine as a monopod, or if I'm using natural barricades or natural things such as stumps, rocks, whatever.
More. Pack rat. Oh, okay. Hit! 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 That was excellent. Oh, just high. Sit safe.
As a natural brace shooting position, I can achieve pretty consistent, pretty quick, and pretty far shots with this carbine, where other students with red dot sights often struggle with. I had a great time with this particular rifle over here. Speaking of shooting distances, mostly everything I've seen is at 200 yards or less, if not 50 yards or less, or 100 yards or less, and occasionally steel silhouettes at 300, 350 yards. But a lot of it is more biased towards shorter range, more handier carbines, not heavier things where it's kind of like either an overweight carbine or a more compact and handy SPR rifle or Mark 12-esque analog. Of course, it being an introductory course of a Gunsite, they emphasize on strong side shooting only. So, unlike using the support hand and shoot the weapon with the opposite hand and do things in the opposite manner, everything is done strong side just to be more consistent, I guess, for newer shooters. And I dropped my microphone. So, for right-handed shooter, right-handed use, for left-handed shooter, left-handed use, and not using either opposite shoulders or opposite hands. So, at shoot houses, they would emphasize using a strong side only, which is a universal way of teaching, especially for firearms that have problems in shooting left-handed, such as a bullpup AK, for example, which kind of leads to some problems overexposing when approaching left-handed sides at a shoot house, but it is what it is. Can't harp on it too much for it being an introductory course, and I assume that any further like advanced or intermediate courses out there offered by Gunsite may teach something like that. But that's an assumption.
Remember what you talked about? We passed this, so we're getting sucked further and further back.
One thing they did not teach would be the use of secondary sighting systems, especially with a more common setup of a top dot over here or a dot mounted at a 45-degree angle, such as a pistol red dot sight or an aim-point micro style mount like a T1 or T2. Everything done with a primary sighting system, and when this is being used, especially for awkward shooting positions or low light where shooting a black reticle while it's dark and the target is black just sucks. But it just creates some sort of problem in the way the instructors encounter it, just because it's a new thing they have hardly ever seen. They emphasize use of the primary sighting system, even if this thing ends up becoming the worst tool for the job when presently mounted on the rifle. Other things I've learned over at Gunsite is drink plenty of water. I was drinking about 3 gallons a day, and when I was not doing that, I nearly became a heat casualty, and I was chugging electrolytes, so Gatorade powder, liquid IVs. I highly recommend liquid IVs. They really, really help revive me. But drink plenty of water, and I was getting to the point where me being a heat casualty wasn't an issue anymore, but I kept on peeing all the time and then having to drink enough water to the point where I felt like I was about to puke. But drink plenty of water. And this is kind of a challenge if you are unacclimated to the hot areas in Arizona, or if you are in the hot area of Arizona and you decide to try and keep yourself under the shade indoors or in air-conditioned structures or vehicles. And when trying to be outside for a long period of time and doing stuff that is more of a challenge for me, so upper body movement with a heavier rifle over here, I was wearing out quite quickly, especially with knee pads, elbow pads, and load bearing equipment. But also shows how weather and heat and everything can impact shooters' performance. Speaking of high heat, having a black firearm such as this over here sucks. And not from just extended strings of fire. In fact, there wasn't really like that over at the introductory 223 Carbine Course. But just at being out in the racks or just standing around outside on a hot, bright day, any sort of black surface, especially ones that are made out of metal, get really uncomfortable and hot to the touch. And while I did outfit tan furniture as well as tan rail covers, it isn't enough. In fact, one thing I will do is I'll strip off all attachments off the rifle, give it a good masking, and spray paint it with tan paint, just to make it easier to use and hold, especially in these hot environments. But yeah, with the very hot weather, it's a good idea just to have some sort of lightweight belt kit. Either stuff mounted directly on the belt, however, with magazines and everything would cause it to sag. I prefer some sort of hybrid belt system that I kind of made myself, where it uses both a handgun holster and handgun magazines, as well as storing water, rifle magazines, and a few other things. But this is a lot better than using a chest rack or a plate carrier, especially in the high heat. And I think it's one of the things where if I was wearing anything heavier, I would like literally pass out, and that wouldn't be good. Well, other observations I have of equipment failures. Well, my guys at Super Duty with minimal lubing and cleaning, I was able to get through about 1,000 rounds of shooting, just standard full metal jacket, brass case ammunition through it. But as soon as I switched over to Russian steel case ammunition, just because I ran out of ammunition, I found that was available at the pro shop. The rifle choked really badly and hard to the point where I needed a secondary carbine to just get back into it. Ended up having a stuck casing and chamber, and the only way to extract the casing was with a ramrod. Not good. And that's kind of an issue with these Armalite pattern rifles over here, is that they're not designed for steel case ammunition, but that's what happened, and I just want to learn and be more proficient with this rifle and know what sort of deficiencies with either the configuration or reliability or accuracy with it. Accurate, dependable, a bit chunky, and don't feed it anything worse than like brass case 223. So when the rifle went down, I switched over to this carbine over here, an FN M4A1 carbine, more or less in government configuration with the addition of a white light, Streamlight white light. I had an Aimpoint Pro reflex sight over here, thought the batteries died. No, switched them out, didn't work. At least I was able to tear off the optic quickly and use the backup iron sights, and I was quite effective and quick with this rifle over here. Probably more than with the Geisley, but that's because I'm already familiar with this rifle in this particular configuration. But at the same time, why go to a training course to learn something that you already know? I wanted to try something different. Other deficiencies in equipment I've observed in both myself and with other students. Adjustable gas systems tend to be a bit wonky and has problems with reliability, especially with different elevations, different ammunition types, as well as if the can is used or not used on it. Other things that other rifle platforms may not work as well. Other students' firearms I've encountered, the Galil Ace Gen 2, quite dependable, quite reliable, great. But the other my products out there, the Tavor, both the X95 and TAR-21, that was the least reliable rifle platform I've seen observed at the course. Other times I've seen all sorts of stuff end up having issues. Can't tell if it's magazines, reliability, wear, but oftentimes I'd see Colt rifles, whether it be the monolithic or the 6920, sometimes having problems choking up. I just don't know why they are. But this Geisley works pretty well as long as you have the right ammunition for it. Other things that happened during the Carbine course, well, to the right of another student who had a malfunctioning Colt monolithic, the shell casing from his rifle ejected funnily and landed perfectly on my neck and created a pretty bad burn. Past the skin, the scar is still visible and still healing about a couple weeks later. Not fun, very painful, and whenever I sprayed sunscreen into it, it burns. So I had to keep everything clean and covered up. Quite annoying. Now, would I recommend Gunsite's Carbine Course? I find that it made me overall a better shooter. I did learn a lot of it, but with a steep price tag and a pedigree to uphold, and with it being a bit dated in their doctrine, that is a bit more difficult of a question to answer. I find that the pistol course to be quite great, and I think that would be their bread and butter over there. But I find that with the new advances in firearms technology for carbines, and with the instructors out there, it makes it difficult for them to approach new students who have stuff of like different brands, different makes, aluminum, free-floated handguards, dual optics, all sorts of stuff. I learned a lot. The instructors are great, and they have a great deal of patience, which is a good trait to have. But I would recommend, if you were to go to Gunsite, to take their Carbine course, but I did appreciate the opportunity to be present for the Carbine course.
My man, tack reload. You are the only person in the class that has tack reloaded so far. Fucking congratulations. Get back from it.
See an arm in that far side right.
Kind of hose that up. You could have done that a lot better.
Hey, get out of here!
So what are the main criticisms I have of Gunsite's Carbine course? I find a lot of the doctrine to be dated, especially centering around the equipment and the firearm itself, where you have nowadays, you have free-floated handguards being the norm, you have magnified optics being common, dual optics, the more modern quick adjust 2-point sling, which is from Blue Force, this Blue Force Vickers, or the Slingster, or the T-Rex sling, or very other similar styles. And the instructors, while experienced, they don't really know how to handle that. Especially nowadays, we have a wide variety of manufacturers, technology, sites, everything now. It makes it quite difficult. And I did not know how to effectively use a reflex sight in the Carbine course, like a tandem reflex sight, nor how to maneuver around a more modern 2-point sling, or how to more effectively use my low-powered variable optic. Another thing I did notice is that over at the close quarters training over the shoot house is that they didn't teach a way to defeat body armor using a carbine. Now, I understand about it being an introductory course, but over at other institutions such as Darcy, for example, or in, say, put into real-world applications such as special forces groups over in the U.S. Army, where instead of double tapping a target with a carbine, instead driving the target down with 5 rounds in a quick succession. Another thing that I did notice is that, why I mentioned that is, with body armor, it's something that anyone is likely to have nowadays, whether it be soldiers and troops, or it could be the prepared citizen, or adversaries, such as rifle militias that are frequently more and more seen with plate carriers and rifle-resistant armor, and being taught a way to defeat these sorts of threats, such as those depicted in the shoot house, where you have multiple armed assailants armed with Kalashnikovs and submachine guns. Nowadays, you might find them wearing plate carriers with steel or ceramic plates. Scary. So I think if Gunsite had a little bit of a more updated curriculum on the equipment used, some sort of introduction to how to defeat body armor, as well as just a brief overview on how to use other equipment that is a bit more modern, like low-powered variable optics, prism sights, as well as tandem reflex sights, I think that the course would go a pretty long way. But otherwise, I'm incredibly grateful for Gunsite for hosting and facilitating the 223 Carbine Course, and a big, big, big thanks to Buzz Mills and Brian DeKind for logistics and facilitation of that cycle for the training course. I have a big, big, big double thumbs up for both of them. Thank you very much. And thank you for the viewer for watching the video on things I learned at Gunsite's 223 Carbine Course. Now, if you excuse me, I'm gonna go strip off all the accessories off this rifle and paint it tan so I don't burn myself next time I grab it in a very hot day. Thank you very much.
Oh, you like pets, don't you? You like pets. Yeah, you do. You like pets, huh? Yeah, you do like pets. Yeah, you like pets. Yeah, you like pets, you little patchy dog. You like pets, don't you? You like pets. Yeah, you do.